Hello, my name is Brother Don, AKA Don Lotson. I'm a volunteer here at New Life Church, a barber in this barber shop. And I just wanted to tell a little bit about myself and my story. I am living in prostate cancer survivorship. I had prostate cancer diagnosed in 2013. I was treated in 2014 and survived since that time. My father had prostate cancer. Since I've had prostate cancer, 4 of my brothers have prostate cancer, and all are living in survivorship at this time. The last one was treated in 2020. Prostate cancer, for us, has been very real. And we talk to sons, nephews, everybody about prostate cancer and the need to always get checked, especially your PSA. Men don't like to talk because what happens with men, if you show a weakness, then people say you're a weak man, you're not good. But that's not true. With this disease, it's beatable and it's possible for you to survive and to live a happy life. Thank you.
So I want to take this moment to thank Brother Don and all the men who run this barbershop for letting us come in and having one of these community conversations about our prostate, about prostate health, prostate cancer, and about our general health as African American men. We decided to do this in the New Life Barbershop because the barbershop for so many men is where life happens. It's where we talk about life, we talk about family, we talk about our hopes, our dreams, we joke, we fight over sports, and we also get a chance to share wisdom and insight with the younger generation, with young boys and young men who are getting their hair cut. So much happens in the barbershop. It's in the barbershop that the civil rights movement received many of its strategies. It's in the barbershop that many political movements were strategized and planned. It's in the barbershop that couples and families stayed together. It's in the barbershop that so much has happened for African American men. But this conversation today is a conversation about prostate cancer. And it doesn't always happen in the barbershop, and it needs to. We're calling this community conversation, Our Health is Your Health. And the your we mean by the word your, our wives, our children, our families, our communities, our neighborhoods. What happens to the man impacts the entire village, the entire community. And so taking care of our health is critical and important. We are here as a collaboration with Heal Collaborative, which is an organization that is committed to having conversations just like this, talking not only about prostate cancer, but so many other health concerns of underserved and impoverished communities and African American communities at large. We're also here as a partnership with Amgen and New Life Community Ministries. And we are in the barbershop sort of as the brainchild of Mr. Justin Williams, who is one of the directors and leaders of this entire production. And I'm going to give us a chance to meet Justin and to hear a little bit of his heart as to why he felt that bringing this to the barbershop was a good idea. Justin?
Well, so I originally had this idea. Of course, I'm the only one on my team with a prostate. I originally...
You must work around a lot of ladies on your team.
Lots of ladies. All of my board is men, but my team, all ladies. So I came up with the title. I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and she hasn't had the best relationship with her father. And her father lives across the country, all the way in Seattle, and she's been the champion in the family health and getting that back on track. So he was not doing so well for probably a couple of weeks, and she was really scared that something might happen to him. So I gave her a few pointers of, some remedies he can take, what he should be doing for his health, and he just wasn't doing it. And I had to tell her that his health is her health. If something happens to her or him, it wouldn't be good for her.
Right.
Especially since he's all the way across the country. So that's how I came up with the name. The reason I wanted to have it in this barbershop is because of the camaraderie amongst all men when we come into the barbershop. We're not our titles. We're not, when we're in there, we're not our family role. We're all men of all ages. One of the most important things about my barbershop is when we come in, we speak to every single barber. Yeah. If you're a regular, you know to come in, you speak to every single barber that's in there. And another amazing thing is when you see a young boy, 8 years old, 9 years old, do the exact same thing. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to have it here.
I think it's just one of the wisest moves to bring this to an environment where men are able to just be themselves and to speak candidly about such a sensitive topic. This very room that we're in is dedicated to men who are at some of the lowest points in their lives, men who are dealing with homelessness, men who are struggling with substance abuse, men who have made some terrible decisions in their lives and have found themselves living on the street or living under a bridge. And we've dedicated this room to providing and giving those men dignity, restoring hope. And that's what this conversation is about. It's about restoring hope and restoring dignity. Justin said that when we come here, we're not our titles, but we do have some amazing men who have some pretty big titles who are a part of this conversation. And I want us to get a chance just briefly to introduce them and for them to tell us who they are themselves. We have two medical doctors who are sharing with us in the conversation today. One is Dr. Bradley Carthon, and he is going to be our keynote presenter, and he'll be speaking a little bit later about prostate cancer and how to identify it and what it does in terms of African American bodies and some of the disparities between the different races of prostate cancer. But I want him to introduce himself as well as Dr. Lawrence Sanders, who is from Grady Health Systems, and they both are going to take just a brief moment to introduce themselves. Dr. Carthon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Being a Georgia native, I always wanted to come back home to try and make a difference because I've seen people as I grew up and my friends or neighbors be affected by this disease, so it's very important to me. I did want to speak a little bit about the science. What is prostate cancer? What is the prostate? Many times people come into my office and they really don't understand what a prostate actually is. And it's a little organ about the size of a walnut that's underneath the bladder. And we don't really think about it unless something's wrong. If people can't go through the bathroom or can't make it through the night. The prostate is really important with providing fluids for sexual function. And as men get older, the prostate enlarges. And so as men get older, they may not have that flow that they normally had as a youngster. But in some cases, there can actually be growth of cells and it can turn into cancer. Now, the important thing is that there are certain risk factors and there are certain groups that are going to be at a much higher risk. And we've heard and we know that African Americans have 2 times the risk for diagnosis and over 2 times the risk of death from prostate cancer. But it doesn't need to be that way. If detected early, up to 95% of people can be cured if detected early. What about other risk groups? Well, family. We just heard a little bit earlier how some men will have numerous brothers or their father or uncles, and you can just see it running in the families. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Where people live in certain countries and parts of the country, body size, being of an unhealthy weight per se, and that's always troubling in the South. But all of these are risk factors. And so we want to think about that when we think of how do we prevent prostate cancer if someone's unlucky enough to be diagnosed from really becoming a problem. How do we catch it when it's time and able to be cured? I'm not talking about treat it, I'm talking about make it go away. Well, we do screening. You know, and it's funny, even my dad, who's a patient, a prostate cancer patient, I would try to have the conversation with him, and it just got a little awkward. He was like, well, they checked everything. They checked that already. I said, you sure? And the funny thing is you don't have to do anything on a physical sense. We can do an absolute blood test. It's called PSA, prostate specific antigen. The blood test if abnormal, can give a clue that something might be going on. And so it doesn't always involve an uncomfortable exam. And for an African American man with a higher risk, we need to start that conversation early. Different groups have slightly different recommendations, but about the age of 40 or so, have that conversation to check that blood test. If something's abnormal, then that test may need to be repeated. And in some unfortunate cases, men may need to have further exams, such as scans or bone scans or an MRI or even a biopsy. But the key point is that screening can detect things early and people can be cured. So how does a man know that something's wrong with his prostate? Well, maybe a gentleman just can't go to the bathroom like he used to. Maybe there's blood in either his urine or his ejaculate or after he has sex. Maybe that gentleman is not able to move around. He's having aches and pains in his body. All of these are clues that something's not right and that should prompt heading to the doctor to get checked out. And as mentioned many times, it's just a blood test that can help sort some things out. In the unfortunate case that someone is diagnosed, they would need tissue. They would need to do a biopsy to really detect what's going on. And interestingly now, we can use that tissue to determine what medicines can best treat that man.
Wow.
Before it might be a 50-50 chance or 30-40, 30-70 chance. But we now can really pinpoint medicines that will work and medicines that are not likely to work for each patient. So if something is detected early, men can be cured. If it's really detected early, sometimes men don't have to undergo treatment. Men can be monitored every few months if something's really there but not really quite yet dangerous. And so we tell men that even if something does show up, with careful observation, you can address it when you need to, whether that's right away or whether if someone has other problems that they need to take care of. Say they have heart failure or diabetes or kidney disease. You can monitor the prostate in the background, and if something changes where you need to do something, you can still have plenty of time to cure it. So if someone is not going to do surveillance, what we call it, they can sometimes do surgery. They can sometimes do radiation. Sometimes we can even drop testosterone, which is not a popular thing to talk about, but we're talking about starving prostate cancer cells, and they feed off of testosterone. That's why we encourage folks to not do things that really increase that too much, because you are increasing that risk. And sometimes people can either have focal killing of the cells with heat or cold or lasers. So there are all kinds of things that could be done in the immediate setting to cure prostate cancer, and men can live their life. Every now and then, though, we do have some unfortunate stories. Men might show up with pain or aches or unable to really walk or move their arms and legs. And that's an unfortunate story when that happens, because you're talking about something that's treatable. The worst thing in the world is to have somebody paralyzed because they ignore the warning signs. And if you want to know the truth, the one type of person that usually makes things happen is the partner or the family member. I've seen people, just something's not right, and the family loads them up and brings them in. Yeah. And sometimes we do have cases where there are prostate cancer cells all over the body. And when that happens, believe it or not, it is still treatable. We now have men that are living 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or more, even when the disease is in a number of places. As I mentioned before, we have to take away the food supply for those cells. We have to take away testosterone. But we have a host of medicines. And remember, we talked about the genes and the genomics. We can determine what medicines work best, whether it's more medicine to affect the testosterone or chemotherapy. We even have immunotherapy approaches, medicines that protect and help the bone remain strong. All of these really make a difference in how long men are living. And I will tell you that we're making progress. We have a difference in how men are detected and the rates of prostate cancer, but the difference between black men and white men is narrowing over the years because of screening, because of effective medications, things where people are just living their life, playing with their kids, working, coming to church, Pastor.
That's
Right?
important. Yes, sir.
People are living their life because of all the treatments that we have. Screening, new medicines, awareness of lifestyle behaviors. Yeah, what we eat matters. And I tell people all the time, that's tough. I grew up in Georgia. I can tell you it's tough.
Yes, sir.
Especially on Sunday when it's time to eat that supper, right? But it's important to talk about, and all it takes is a slight modification of things to make it better. So I would just say this to our people watching. 1, pay attention to your body. 2, don't be afraid of the checkup. That's going to save your life, whether it's prostate cancer or other things. 3, if you are unfortunate enough to be diagnosed with prostate cancer, first just take a deep breath and realize it is very, very treatable. There are a lot of resources to help with that. And lastly, just understand that your doctor team, your peers are there to help you through this. Support groups will make all the difference. They can really put things in perspective. And just remember that it's beatable. We tell people that all the time.
I love that.
Amen.
I love that. It's not just treatable, it's beatable.
It is beatable.
There were a couple things you said, Doc, that I've not heard before. One is testosterone is a food. It is actually a power source for prostate cells. Can you talk more about that? That's not something that I've heard.
Well, it's just about biology. And I have patients when we do treatment and they have these symptoms. For example, when we give medicines to drop testosterone, we basically are inducing menopause. And this is the part where all the wives start giggling.
We're
'Cause the
inducing
guys-
menopause in the men?
We're taking away the sexual hormones.
You've got to talk about.
No, we're
This has gotta
we're
be-
taking away the hormones. Because the prostate cells use those to grow. So we're taking them away.
My
And
wife
yes,
is going to love hearing this.
they have some side effects. I'm not going to sit here and lie. It's not pleasant. But when the man is talking about, or when the patient's talking about hot flashes and night sweats, the wives are sitting there giggling. And they're like, well, I tried to tell you. But there are ways for that to even be managed. But it's all about biology. That's what helps the prostate tube grow and develop. That's what helps men perform, be able to be a father, to be sexually active. But the double-edged sword of that is that testosterone can help those cells to grow. But here's the thing. We've now learned when we need to drop those levels, but we've also learned that we can give men a break. So if we get things under control, we can monitor their PSA, we can monitor scans, we can monitor how they're doing, and hold tight and let people get back to living.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to develop that relationship, because I have folks coming in, we have some discussions that would make a young man blush. I'm like, you know, the wives get involved and tell me what's working, what's not, but we can make a difference. And so after people have gotten some good treatment going, we can take a break for that. And the other thing is that we have our colleagues that have all types of things that can help in that area.
Yes.
Because it can affect the relationship.
Absolutely.
But if we catch it early, we can minimize all that. It's when we wait is when it really becomes a problem.
A word that you used was immunotherapy. And can you explain that word for the rest of us laymen who don't know what it means?
Well, I talk about one of our statesmen of Georgia. I'll talk about Jimmy Carter. Now, he did not have prostate cancer, but his type of treatment was called immunotherapy. And what that means is now we're not just giving chemo. People, well, my big mom had cancer, and I ain't doing all that. Well, you don't have to. I don't make anybody do anything they don't want to. But we now have medicines that can adjust and work with your own immune system to better fight cancer cells. And so we now have some therapies for prostate where they actually take some of your white blood cells, they teach them what to fight. They give a little bit of help to understand that prostate cancer proteins are bad. They then give you back your own cells, and that is used to stimulate your immune system to fight the prostate cancer cells. And so all of these are the different types of medicines that are now, and what I like to talk about as our toolbox. And it's such that if one thing doesn't work, you go back to your toolbox. Don't like the side effects from that, go back to your toolbox. Some things you may never need, but we still will have our toolbox. And so a lot of different mechanisms to treat this disease.
One of the hopeful things that you said that was very relieving to hear is that the disparity gap between African American men that are being diagnosed with prostate cancer and white men who are being diagnosed with prostate cancer, that gap is slowly shrinking. And that's something good to hear, that this is becoming a lot more mainstream among African Americans. Can you talk a little bit more about the reason for the shrinking of that gap?
Yeah, you know, so I think a lot of times people like to place all of this on one particular problem or reason. It's not just genetics. It's not just economics. There's a lot of things that go into play, but here's an interesting fact. Now we're starting to see some studies come out where they look at a medicine and they say, hold on a second, let's keep it real simple. I want to give this medicine to 50 white men. I want to give it to 50 black men. Same medicine, same doctor's visit, same facilities.
Same treatment.
Same treatment.
50 white men, 50 black men.
And guess what? They do just as well. And with some treatments, it seems like African American men might respond a little bit better.
Wow.
So you're taking away one of the big things, which is access. I can't tell you how many people will come and say, Doc, I like you, I really want to keep my appointment, but, it take me 2.5 hours. I got to catch the gold line, got to take the bus to the line and then come through, and then, that's a big deal, access. Bias that we might not even know about, people making slight decision changes. So when people have the same medicines, the same environment, the same opportunities, a lot of that disparity can go away. And that's why it's important to have representation. If a doctor, you're just more comfortable with him, that's okay, that's your right. Representation and access matters.
Access, that's a very important word. Dr. Sanders, how has the denial, or at least the barrier to access, impacted African American men with getting the kind of treatment that they need, even the screening that they need for prostate cancer? How significant has a barrier to access been?
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me, because this is a good opportunity to have a really frank discussion.
Absolutely.
I want to pick up on something that was said, and that is, if you have a study where white men and black men have the same level of disease and get the same level of treatment, the outcomes are basically the same. All right? And in fact, in some cases, black men do even better than white men. So that says if we get equal treatment, then everything is fine. But the problem is
Equal treatment.
that treatment has been unequal and access has been unfair. And the way I think about it is this, that no doctor gets up in the morning and says they want to do a bad job of taking care of black folks. But when you look at the collective, we have worse outcomes, particularly as black men, period. So it's really about how we access the healthcare system. Then there's another question, and this is really how I've sort of tried to spend my career. I'm a primary care physician, and I now focus on access and how we do things at Grady Hospital. But I think you said something very important, and you referenced your father. And I would say the same thing, is that often as black men, we go to the doctor. And you notice I said we, because the other place where we take off our titles is when all of us go to the doctor.
That's right.
All right? So when we go to the doctor, we go with the idea that we want the doctor to tell us there ain't nothing wrong.
Right.
So we don't really tell the whole story. I think you said it very well. They checked everything. Everything was fine. But that's when you need that partner, that daughter, that wife, and you got to talk to them, and you have to learn to finesse talking to them in front of the man.
Yeah.
And because you don't want no stuff when they go home.
No.
I think
none won't be none.
Yes, you got it. And so you've got to develop that. So I think it's access, but it's really the combination of the issues of race that impact education, the issues of race and racism that impact access to jobs, the issues of race and racism that impact people's ability to, even though they have sufficient education, to get a job that matches that education. All of those things contribute to not getting to the doctor in time. So I'd say a lot of this disparity in prostate cancer, a lot of it has to do with access. But I want to take a step even back further. I think we talked about what we eat. The way I look at it is we become what we eat.
Absolutely.
You know, and you got to really think about that. Soul food, our challenge is to make it healthy food and keep the taste. And I think that's important because what you eat, a diet high in fat, a diet high in cholesterol, all of those things go into impacting, and I don't want to say it's a direct impact, that testosterone level. And so if that testosterone level is higher, then you can be more at risk for prostate cancer. And I think we've looked at that for a long time and know that testosterone and prostate cancer don't really go well together. You got to get some exercise. Got to get some exercise. So now what does that mean? You're going to be a weekend warrior, go out and try to run a marathon and you haven't done anything in 6 years? How many of us have done that? Because the thing is, the next day you can't do anything, so you don't do it anymore. So the really clear thing about exercise is to start slowly, just walking every day. You know, Dr. Satcher, who was Surgeon General, often says that the more color on your plate, the healthier the food. Think about that for a minute. And you got to get beyond meat and gravy and rice, meat, gravy, and potatoes. You got to have some red food, some yellow food, some green food, some stuff that causes fiber. So you really have to think about what you eat. And then you've got to think about the other things that we do. Responsible sexual behavior, that's very important of that. Responsible use of alcohol. And really, I usually will say, if people smoke, you need to quit.
Absolutely.
You need to quit. And so to me, those are the things that come back that impact health that aren't about going to the doctor. And I think that the other important thing I would say here is, we talked about the treatment. Well, before you can get to the treatment, you got to see a doctor. You got to see a doctor and you got to be willing to go in. And I tell people this, that you have to find a doctor that you can talk to and that you are willing to share very important details of your life with. And if you're not willing to do that, or that you and the doctor don't have that relationship, then you need to find another doctor. And that's the bottom line. And there's no problem with that. And the way I tell people what you look for is you got to look for a doctor who listens to you. Who listens to you. One of the most important lessons I learned in medical school, and I still carry it with me now some 40 years later, is that the best thing you can do, young doctor, is learn to listen. Because your patient knows more about their disease than you do. And your job is to listen long enough to be able to craft a plan to help them. So I covered a lot of ground. I covered some of the things that we call the social determinants of health. I tried to cover a little bit about access to healthcare. And I tried to kind of frame that in a society that, whether we want to admit it or not, race and racism plays an important part, particularly the aspects of structural racism and as it comes to access to care.
Many people don't believe, and others aren't convinced, that healthcare racism exists. You'd think that when you go to the doctor, whether you're white, black, Asian, or Hispanic, it shouldn't matter. A body is a body, and you're going to get treated the same. You're going to get the same treatment, the same care, and et cetera. But I think that African American men and women have learned that that's just not the case. Can you talk a little bit more about healthcare racism and how it impacts something as critical as prostate cancer?
I guess the first thing I would say is you can't talk about healthcare racism. Because, as I think you said, no doctor would willingly admit that they're racist. But you have to look at how we're taught, the books that we learn from, the history that we learn from, how we learn to interpret things, whether or not we question things. Same thing with education. That's why I sort of tried to put all that together. And I mean, I can put it in a way because in 2000, the Institute of Medicine, now the Academy of Medicine, really published a study, Unequal Treatment. And it showed that black folks get unequal treatment. And I think for me, the best evidence that I have for that is a group of people on this planet with the decreasing life expectancy, even in America. As American life expectancy has gone up, there's one group that has decreasing life expectancy, and that's us, black men. Now, no doctor is racist. No system is racist according to what most people want to believe. But I can't believe that if that outcome has been sustained for more than 300 years, that we've got some systemic problems. And that's how I would look at it. So I'm not calling the white doctors racist. I'm not calling the black doctors racist. That's why I said you got to find a doctor who listens to you, regardless of race, and who's willing to work with you. But I think the system and the society that we live in, we can't take race out of it. It's there every day. It's how people look at you. It's how people interpret you. It's how they carry their own implicit bias, if you will. So that's what I would have to say to that. So I hope I didn't call anybody racist, but I hope I helped us understand our role in this and what we have to do to take care of each other and to take care of ourselves, because I agree that our health is everybody's health.
I think that structural racism, and we all would agree that when racism exists in a structural capacity, it's latent, it's not overt, it's not intentional, but it becomes an aspect of the culture itself. And you live in that culture, and the culture begins to have those overriding tendencies that tend towards racism. So no doctor is racist, and no lawyer or judge is, but the system itself lends towards that.
If we're going to have a conversation about this, I'm going to share my thought. My thought is this. I'd probably behave the same way. If I had all the advantage, do you think I'd give any of it up? I'd do everything I could to keep that advantage. And that is what is so, that's why it's invisible. Because everybody's trying to keep their advantage. White men have had significantly more advantages. And the system of structural racism is really designed to keep those advantages. Every time we get close, they change the rules. And we don't have to go too far beyond the Georgia legislature to look at that.
Oh, you're getting into some deep waters now, some deep waters now. But it's the barbershop. It's what we do in the barbershop.
This is the barbershop.
It is the barbershop.
It is the barbershop. It's where we get a chance to talk to each other.
Yeah. Dr. Sanders, thank you so much. For both Dr. Carthon and Dr. Sanders, just last question. What practically can men do to prevent this? I know screening is important, but before I get to the doctor, and Dr. Sanders touched on a litany of these things, but kind of give it to us and tell us what can we do to prevent having a prostate issue?
I think a couple of things that are just very, very simple. One, know your history. Talk to your family. A lot of times there's a health problem that's around family members and we just don't know because we don't talk about it. Two, all the things mentioned, moving, activity, slight little changes to start with one's diet, making sure that people are doing regular checkups. These are simple things that can really make a difference and help detect things early if they happen. And the last thing I'd say is talk with each other.
Right.
Keep each other on point. That's what I would say.
I would actually just echo what he said. And I would actually say that prostate cancer often doesn't occur in isolation. Many of the same men who have prostate cancer also have heart disease, also have hypertension, have all the other diseases. So we have to kind of think about how we prevent all of this together. And I think that starts when you're young. You know, we often talk about genetics. And many things look like genetics. If you think about who taught you to eat, it's your mother and father, your grandmother. So that looks like genetics. So I think we got to think about what we eat. We got to think about exercise. And we've got to think about how we relate to each other to keep each other strong. And to me, that's the most important thing. And I think the gentleman who opened this said it very well, that when you walk in, no, it was you. When you walk in the barbershop, you speak to everybody. Yeah. You speak to everybody. And if you see an 8-year-old boy in the barbershop, you speak to him too and address him in a way that he has an opportunity to learn. And I think that's what we have to do from day one for everybody.
This conversation has transcended just prostate cancer. I think we're talking about life, we're talking about health overall. We're talking about more than just prostate cancer. When you discuss our diet, our exercise, you discuss our mental health, our social health, our family health, our physical health, this is holistic. And that's how you make certain that you get the most out of your life. And so we've got some gentlemen here, some young guys who want to ask a few questions from the audience. There's a group called Emerging 100. And it's a very strong group of intelligent young men that have some questions for these two doctors. And I'm going to ask them to fire away. Mr. C.J. Best.
So my question is for Dr. Carthon. We talked about 8-year-olds in the barbershop. What conversation should we be having with our sons, our nephews, and other young men in our communities around prostate cancer?
Well, I don't think it's ever too early to talk about our health and the health that affects our families. You know, for example, with my own dad, they know G-Daddy was sick. And I talked to them about, you know, what's going on. And it's just a part of life lessons, you know, what's going to happen to you as a young man. And it's not to scare them, but to let them know that, you know, we need to be aware of these things and use it as a lesson, you know, as we talk about our health and as we talk about growing up. So I think if folks understand the biology of things, what it means, and as they get older to keep awareness around that, then we're one step ahead of the game, because when I was a kid, we didn't have those kind of conversations. But we really do try to do that with my kids now.
Absolutely. And this is not taught in school. There's no curriculum base for this. So having the conversations at home is where our children are going to learn about their bodies. Yeah. Our next question comes again from the young men that are here in the back, and DeRicky has a question to ask.
My question is for Dr. Sanders. What do interested constituents and community leaders need to basically help policymakers improve access to treatment for these diseases like prostate cancer?
Well, first of all, I think we have to talk to our health and talk about our health to our policymakers and elected officials. We've got to talk about what's important to us, and we have to then support them in efforts to move health forward. I mean, I think one of the most important things that we can do to improve access for everybody is to expand Medicaid. I think that's a very important thing. And to make sure that African American men get coverage and get coverage for health services. Medicaid can do that. So I think it's that conversation about what's important to us as individuals, but what's more important to us as a collective, and how we carry on that dialogue with our elected decision makers and then hold them accountable and vote if it doesn't work.
This has been an absolutely engaging conversation, and I want to give Dr. Carthon and Dr. Sanders an opportunity just to summarize your thoughts and give us a final statement on this issue.
Yeah, I think, there's been so much said. I think if I had to distill it down to a couple of statements, the things that I would remind everyone about is that this is treatable, this is beatable, and we have to talk about it and advocate not only for ourselves, but for our friends and family members. There's been so much treatment advancement, so many things that are in the pipeline that we can make this different. We can change the way that this has been done. We just have to talk about it and advocate for ourselves and our brothers.
Thank you, Dr. Carthon. Dr. Sanders, your final thoughts.
I'd say the most important thing, and there's a lot been said, but I'd say the most important thing is everybody needs to find a primary care physician that you can talk to and that you're willing to work with. Work on your diet, get some exercise, even if it's just walking down the street for a few blocks every day. Get some color on your plate and take good care of yourself and take care of each other.
Thank you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. So I'd like to transition the conversation a little bit and begin talking about research. This is the hard work that goes behind the scenes in making certain that prostate cancer can be treated, prostate cancer can be cured, and the research is the key. We are honored to have Dr. Shafiq Khan, who is the recent former director of the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development at Clark Atlanta University. It's an honor to have you. What exactly is prostate cancer research?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. Prostate cancer research is not different from other cancer research in many ways. Main thing you want to do is to understand the disease, how the cell becomes a cancer cell, how it progresses, how it moves from one place to the other. And that tells you that what are the places where you can attack the cancer? How can you develop a drug to stop those activities? So that's part of the cancer research. But we also look at genetics and biology of it. Genetics, for example, we talk about health disparities and we talk about difference in African Americans or people of African descent have a higher incidence of cancer and mortality. It's not just that they are diagnosed late, but even if you diagnose an African American man and a Caucasian man at the same age, usually the cancer in the African American is more progressed and more advanced. So what's the reason for that? Are there any genetic reasons for that? And of course, the main thing is trying to develop new drugs. Because if you know that prostate cancer is treatable if it is localized in the prostate. But once it moves out of it and starts spreading, then it becomes untreatable. I mean, it's uncurable. You can treat it, you can prolong it. You can get a few years sometimes, but it ultimately results in mortality. So you're always trying to develop new drugs which can stop it from moving one place to the other.
In terms of the genetics of prostate cancer and how it impacts African American men and Caucasian men differently, earlier in our previous segment, we heard Dr. Carthon and Dr. Sanders saying that when white men and black men are treated with prostate cancer at the same stages, that the cancer responds to the treatment much the same. What I hear you saying is that this is not on the treatment side. This is on the progress and progression of the cancer itself. It behaves differently in African American men and in white men. Is that right?
Yes, especially early stages. That I think the disparity comes primarily first thing is that it's diagnosed too late. in the African Americans. And when it's diagnosed, it's usually at a more advanced stage than it is in the Caucasians. But once they're equal and then get the equal treatment, then I agree with my colleagues that then the chances are, and sometimes African American patient actually does better compared to Caucasians. But only if you diagnose them at the same level and treat them with the same treatment.
And of course, access has a lot to do with that.
Access, yes, that is.
Let's talk a little bit about family histories. How significant is the historical medical condition of the family in terms of impacting prostate cancer incidences?
Yeah, we touched that in the previous segment too. It's about 15% of all prostate cancers are genetically controlled. So there are some genes which people are trying to now identify that may make you more prone to the cancer. But if, for example, your grandfather or your father or your uncle or your brothers develop prostate cancer, your chances of developing cancer increase by about 50%. Wow. So it has a genetic element. So we advise people that if there is a family history, then those men should start actually screening themselves at a much earlier age, even 35 or 40 years, and not wait until 50 or 60 years of age.
Dr. Khan is not going to tell you this, so I'm going to tell you. He built one of the largest cancer research development centers in the country, right here in Atlanta at Clark Atlanta University. And we just really want to say thank you for his years of service to this particular field and industry, and it's just an honor to have you on this.
I want to qualify that statement. It's only on the prostate cancer research. It's not. We're not the biggest in everything, but we decided at that time when I came that we're going to just do one thing and do it well and focus on one because we were such a small group. So in prostate cancer research, we are one of the largest.
You see how humble he is? In prostate cancer research, one of the largest in the country, and it's just an honor to have him here. Thank you, Dr. Khan, for being a part of this conversation. Now, Paul, you get the privilege of working at this prostate cancer research development center at Clark Atlanta, and you're involved in community outreach and engagement. Tell me what you do on a daily basis and how you impact this issue of prostate cancer.
Yes, so I do serve as the Community Engagement and Outreach Officer, and my job is to provide the strategic oversight for what we do in the community in terms of outreach. This is an example of a phenomenal opportunity to have rich dialogue with the HEAL Collaborative, because in this space, and I regard the barbershop as a public health center for African American men, we are able to have these conversations. These conversations are a big part of prevention or preventative measures. This is an opportunity to show people that they have a hand in what happens to them health-wise. And it pushes African-American men to not only have these conversations, but for younger men, our sons, our nephews, our younger cousins, our neighbors, to see us have these conversations, and it pushes them to open up and share their thoughts and feelings as well.
So talk to me a little bit about underprivileged men and underprivileged families, those who are underserved, low-income households, and they're not insured.
Yes.
How do they get screened for prostate cancer? How do they even get access to do that if they don't have insurance?
Absolutely.
And do you see this on a regular basis?
We see it all the time, and we hear about it. Early in the segment, we spoke about the social determinants of health. Now we're talking about access, we're talking about transportation, and we're also talking about health insurance. And what we find is there are numerous resources, an abundant amount of resources that are available if you can take organizations like the Cancer Center at CAU, and we can kind of transcribe what we find and put it in layman's terms and give it to the community. One of the organizations that we work with is CHAMPS. CHAMPS is run through Midtown Urology in Atlanta. They do a monthly men's health clinic, and it's free of charge. It's absolutely free, and what you do is you register, and when you go, there are preventative health tests for chronic diseases such as diabetes, cholesterol, PSA testing we talked about earlier, even rectal exams to test for prostate cancer. So I think that it's up to organizations like ours to get in touch with the community and say, hey, on the medical side, we know about this, but let me give it to you in a way that you can understand and connect you with resources that are free of charge, and you don't feel like I have to have health insurance to be healthy.
That's great. That's great. What about peer support?
Okay, yes, there are a lot of peer support groups around. Two organizations stand out in my mind for this area, which is Georgia Core. Mm-hmm. Georgia Core is a nonprofit organization that was founded specifically to support African American men who have prostate cancer. Not only do they have resources for those that are in active treatment and survivorship, but they also have something interesting for caretakers. And I think that that's a very important part of prostate cancer treatment that people need to understand. A lot of these men are being taken care of by their families, their daughters, their wives, etc., and that can be very stressful on that person as well. So Georgia Core provides a lot of peer support groups, not only for the survivors and those in active treatment, but those who take care of them as well.
This information, things like the peer support groups and others, are medical doctors and practitioners, are they equipped with this information for patients when they come in to help them if there is a cancer diagnosis that's given?
I believe medical doctors, like all professions, come from a myriad of backgrounds. And I think that when you talk about how do we interact with patients, and now you're speaking of sensitivity training, I think that that's something that's ongoing. I think that you should always endeavor to listen as a medical professional, but as a public health practitioner, I think that that's where we kind of come in, and we're able to kind of bridge that gap between the two.
Right. Thank you for your work. Yes, thank you for your work. What would you say to a family that has just been given a cancer diagnosis and they may not necessarily have the best access to health care, and the breadwinner in that home has just been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and they come to you? What do you say to them?
The first thing that I want to say is it's not a death sentence. You have control, you have resources, and you have the opportunity to speak out and get the resources that you need. And if you don't feel like you have that, then there are individuals out there who literally their whole career is built around helping you find those resources. But it's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the world. And survivors are strong. They're around, and they come in so many different forms, whether it's a support group or individual. But the most important thing is that you have a relationship with your primary care physician, and you open up and you speak about what it is that's happening with your health.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Paul. Dr. Khan, for the last 18 years, you've been working at the Cancer Research Center at Clark Atlanta University for prostate cancer, and you were instrumental in starting it. Can you tell me a little bit about why you started it?
Well, when I moved here, I came from Texas Tech, actually. I was there in the medical school. And I came to Clark Atlanta, and they asked me to reorganize the cancer research program. So at that time, we decided that we're going to focus on prostate cancer because of the health disparities in the African American community. And being an HBCU, we wanted to be community relevant. So we not only started the research, I'm a biologist myself, so we not only started the basic research, but we also started the educational training program. We have produced about 40 PhDs from the Cancer Center in the last 10, 15 years. Wow. And also we started the community outreach program. And that, I'm very happy that we were able to do it. And what Paul is just saying, I think it makes sense for HBCUs to do this because we can build the trust that is lacking in majority schools and places. So I think it was for me, it was a fantastic opportunity to do something good.
Thank you, Dr. Khan, for your work and your service. Paul, thank you for your work at the Cancer Research Center at Clark Atlanta University. Thank you, gentlemen, for being present.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so before you guys get away from us, we have a question from one of the gentlemen in our audience that I'd like to get a chance to hear. This is Mr. Julius Spears, who is the chairman of the board of HEAL Collaborative, and we're happy to have him with us. Mr. Spears?
We've heard Dr. Cawthon and Dr. Sanders speak about the gap disparity that is being minimized at this point. Things are getting better in terms of the research and treatment for prostate cancer for Black men as compared to white. What percentage of Black males are participating in clinical trials where they're really developing new medicines and new modalities for the treatment of prostate cancer? Are we participating, and at what level?
Thank you very much for that question. I think that there is always has been a little difficulty to enroll African American patients in the clinical trials, and that has been because of the trust issues in the medical system in the country. And so it's still, the problem still persists, but it's getting a little better. It's but it's a lot of pharmaceutical companies and funding agencies are trying to do that, trying to bring more people in. And it's the forum like this that we have to make sure that we talk to African American men that they need to participate in clinical trials, because that's how the new drugs are developed. And some of the drugs work better in one community than the other. So it's important that we participate in those.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spears. Thank you, Dr. Khan. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you for being with us and in the conversation today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. So I'd like to transition the conversation and really talk to some warriors. These are some men who have gone through prostate cancer and come out on the other side. I want you guys to meet Mr. Andre Stanton and the Honorable Virgil Flood, who was a former Georgia House representative. I'd love to have both of them share a little bit of their story. I want to begin speaking to you, Andre, about your diagnosis. When you got the news that this was prostate cancer, what was going through your mind?
Wow. Yeah, so it was, I was diagnosed in 2012, almost 10 years to the day. And so it was devastating to me. I was just turning 40 years old. There was no particular indicators, at least I didn't think there were, in terms of symptoms. There was nothing physically that was going on with me where that seemed to line up with what the physician was telling me. And so it really took me by surprise. For 48 hours after hearing that I was, diagnosed, and I'm, of course, speeding up a bit, because my primary care physician recommended that I take a PSA test. It was during the course of an annual physical, and that's where it began. That's where the process began. And because of the rapport or the trust that I had with my PCP, I took his advice. He wanted me to see a urologist. And so I did that, even though I felt like I was fine. I was okay. Right. I did it anyway, and I'm so glad that I did. And but once I got there and I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, it was numbing, to me. Have a wife and 4 daughters. I didn't know how to even respond in the moment, because after the physician had said that, we had done a biopsy and it has been determined that you were diagnosed, or you are diagnosed with stage 1 prostate cancer. The physician began to say things such as, it is treatable. I believe they were saying that because I didn't hear anything else beyond that point. I believe they were saying things like it's stage 1, and so there are so many options that are available to you. And so, as I was saying a moment ago, 48 hours, I just kind of held this in. It was 24 hours went by before I even shared it with my wife, being very candid. And when I did, I just struggled, for that whole period in time. What do I do? How could this have happened? So many emotions were flooding my mind, and it was very challenging, to say the least.
How did your wife and your family handle the news when you did share it with them?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My wife, of course, was very supportive, and just helped me to, maintain my positivity, because I think that was very important. Oftentimes we all deal with challenges, but it's not so much the challenge itself as it is how we approach it and the things that we do in terms of managing those emotions, because they were real. But once I got beyond that 48-hour period, and within that period, I was, I'd seen my funeral. I was almost, it was almost as if it was a death sentence. I'm thinking of everything.
Your light flashed before your eyes.
Absolutely, everything I didn't get to do in the places that I felt as though that I, didn't get to experience. And so within that period, I started discovering and finding more about this particular illness. And we tend to do that when things impact us directly. We get vested in a different way, and we want to know a little bit more about it. And so I did that. And but yeah, my wife was supportive. My mother was a part of this as well. So my wife and my mother were like the core, the nucleus, which I shared this with at that time.
Wow. And Virgil, you are a former Georgia State representative, but prostate cancer touches people at all levels and at different stages of life. What's your story? When were you diagnosed, and how did you take the news?
Well, actually, I was a bit relieved, to be honest with you, because I kind of expected it to happen, right? So I have a family history. I was fortunate to have a primary care physician who I really appreciated his involvement, and we would do the PSA test every year. And mine was low, but it increased, and it increased to a level where he was somewhat concerned and said, it's not high, but it's high for you. So you need to go get checked, and went to the urologist. And I'd had that same urologist for other care over the years, so we had another relationship there that was already in place. When the urologist came back, I think he was a bit more concerned about it than I was. He was like, oh man, I just hate to tell you this. I'm like, well, I kind of thought it would happen at some point, right? Because of the family history and the fact that I know that black men tend to have the likelihood of getting it, and because I'd been seeing the changes in the PSA levels. So my expectation was at some point it's gonna happen, and so now I could deal with, it's here, what do I do about it? And so I spent most of my reaction was, let's do some research and find out what the treatment options are and what the implications of those treatment options are, so that I know if I choose A, what happens, if I choose B, what could happen. And my wife and I did a ton of research over the course of probably 4 or 5 days to determine what was the best course of action. And we had, at the time it was about 10 years ago, so we had 2 kids that were college age. We shared it with them, and I tell my son now, who's in his early 30s, of course, that he needs to be very aware and cognizant of the fact that he has a greater likelihood than other young men his age, and he has to be aware and ready to have the proper care and treatment available for him.
Yeah. I think it's amazing that you were able to get in front of the bad news because your family history prepared you for it. Was there ever a time prior to your diagnosis that you had this tinge of fear that this could happen to me because it happened to members of your family? Did you ever experience any of those trepidations or concerns before the diagnosis, when you were just learning that this is a possibility for you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I as I said, I expected that it might happen at some point, and so I was doing the things that I felt were appropriate to do. So, healthy diet, exercise, try to keep a good balance of a healthy lifestyle, which I think probably, if nothing else, allowed me to stay healthy overall. And so there weren't other issues with cholesterol or diabetes or any of the other factors that might ordinarily affect people like me. But so my effort to try to maintain a healthy lifestyle was my sort of effort to delay it or postpone it as long as I could. But I always thought that, yeah, it's probably a good likelihood that I could be diagnosed.
Biggest advice you'd give to someone who has just gotten the diagnosis?
Research. There's a ton of research. In fact, I did some research even today that there are so many options that are available. As the gentleman said, as the doctor said earlier, it's treatable and it's beatable. And there are different tools that are available for each of us based on our own experiences, comfort levels, and willingness to try different things, right? So surgery, radiation, all of these options are available. So do what's right for you, but there are literally 10, 15, 20 different options that you could choose. Just find one that's appropriate for you.
Andre, what was your greatest weapon? You're dealing with a diagnosis, you've just gotten the news, you're in shock, and a little different than Virgil. Virgil was expecting this to happen possibly at some point in his life. For you, it's a surprise. What is the biggest weapon you had in your arsenal to fight this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One I would say is prayer, quite frankly. Yeah. We tend to do that when we face significant challenges in life. But just in general, yeah, prayer was paramount for me at that time, as well as support. And me getting beyond the fact that I have this condition or this illness, accepting that for what it was, and doing what I could do in order to beat it. And as Virgil just said a moment ago, that it is beatable. So I had to accept that. I had to accept that and do the work that that it would take in order to be there for my family. And so a part of that is having positive outlook, expecting a positive outcome. And so I think that was huge for me.
Yeah, thank you. Virgil, I am so appreciative that you had the conversations with your son and preparing him for that. What conversations would you have wanted to have on the policy side with your former position? What would you say policymakers need to know in order to enact good policy related to prostate cancer? And I'd love to hear your answer, and then I want to speak to Representative Mitchell.
Well, part of it is that it impacts a large number of men. Obviously, more black men than other men, and more black Americans than blacks in other countries. And so it is an issue that is treatable if it's diagnosed early. And so having research and exposure and giving people the opportunity to get an early diagnosis can save not only lives, but significant dollars to the state, right? Because when men can't go to work, they aren't earning money, they aren't paying taxes. They aren't running their businesses, they aren't contributing to the state's coffers. That's not a good thing for anyone. And the more that we can do to improve the health outcomes of not only men, but of all people in our communities, the better our societies are, the better our communities are, and the more prosperous the state is as overall.
We are honored to have Representative Billy Mitchell here with us. He's a state representative for Georgia. And thank you for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to sit in the barbershop and have a conversation about prostate cancer. I want to jump in with what is, I think, the biggest and probably hottest topic related to any of our healthcare concerns, and that's Medicaid. How important is expanding Medicaid to combat this issue of prostate cancer prevention and treatment?
Pastor, it's so good to be here discussing this issue with you, and without a doubt, that is the question of the day. Unfortunately, I used to be so happy with the way the interactions of government work until I got on the other side, and I see that so much of it is influenced by anything but good policy and good actions. The reality is the very notion of expanding Medicaid is caught up in just what is just pure and simple political gain, because expanding Medicaid to cover those who would not be able to afford it was proposed by a Democratic president. We have those who feel that we cannot support it. In Georgia, for instance, we trumpet ourselves as the #1 place to do business. Not only would expanding Medicaid be able to deal with this issue for those who are underinsured or uninsured, but it's a good business practice. Yes. There are hospitals, particularly in rural areas, where they are the #1 economic generator. They are the #1 employer, obviously the #1 provider of health care. And without expanding Medicaid, those services go away. I'm so impressed with Andre and my friend Virgil because they had regular visits to a physician. I can tell you there are communities near us that just don't have that opportunity for that kind of access. And particularly for American black men. That's why I applaud you, Pastor Harris, for what you're doing here, because we've got to get a signal to black men in this country the importance of regular physician visits. I don't know, it must be some kind of badge that we wear to say, I don't go to the doctor, when the reality is, if we go to the doctor, we could save ourselves, our health, we can save our families, we can make our communities healthier. A safer community is a healthy community. A more vibrant community is a healthier community. So I applaud you, and we need to do all that we can to take this out of the political process and make it a scientific process where we expand Medicaid.
Absolutely. In the earlier segments that we've had, we discussed access. And I don't want to breeze by that word and assume that everyone understands what it means. Describe what we mean when we say access to health care and when we say access disparities. What exactly are we talking about?
Well, first of all, when we talk about access, most people in this country have health care through their employer. When you are underemployed or unemployed, therefore you don't have that access to employer-provided health care. Right. In same way, unfortunately, because we have so many who are underemployed or unemployed, they wait until their difficulties get so large. As we said, they caught it early enough. If you don't have health care, you're going to have to spend money out of your own pocket, then you tend to wait till it gets so bad that you have no choice but to go to the physician. And as these two gentlemen said, they were able to head off what could have been catastrophic by just early intervention and access. And so that's what we mean. We have so many out there that just don't have the access. It's just an amazing concept in this country. And Pastor, one of these days we're going to come up with a solution to this. We're going to go around the country and we're going to get this. We talk about not expanding Medicaid and not giving folks health care. Right today, someone could jump over that proverbial wall they're trying to build at the border, fall down and hurt themselves. They would be transported to the nearest hospital. Doesn't matter what their status is, their nationality, whatever.
Immediate access.
Immediate access. We can walk into the hospital now if we have some emergent condition and say, when they ask you, how are you going to pay for this? You can say, hey, I refuse to pay. If it's an emergency, the condition you have, they must treat you. Yes. They must treat you. And as we all know, the most expensive health care there is through the emergency room. Aspirin is 10 times more expensive in the emergency room. I say we need to do a different kind of thing, much like you do with your car. You know, General Motors gives you a car. Today it's like, you know, you maintain it, but if it gets broken, we'll fix it at no cost. That's what our healthcare system is. I believe we need to flip it. You bring it to us to make certain that you're healthy. You're responsible for maintaining it and changing the oil so that it can last long. And that's what our healthcare should demand, that people come in and get the checkups and get the screenings so it doesn't become much more expensive later.
What I hear you saying, Representative Mitchell, is that we need to put the weight of healthcare on the preventative side and not necessarily only on the treatment side. The treatment side is needed, necessary, but if we put some more weight on prevention, we would mitigate some of the conditions that require treatment.
Absolutely. You know, so my father used to say all the time when I first got a car, if you change the oil, you maintain the car, you will have less expensive down. If you don't do those things, you're going to have a great expense.
We can't do that if people don't have, and there's our word, access. If they don't have insurance, if they don't have the ability to go to the doctor, unless something's wrong, but preventative doctor visits are just not within the realm of possibility for people who don't have access. So I want to ask the question, what exactly is the argument on the other side for not expanding Medicaid?
Well, the arguments are, and as I said, being on this side, you know, there was a former legislator, her name was Lois DeBerry, who used to say to me all the time, she's from Tennessee, that elected officials, what it's really about is dividing up who gets the money. That's what it's really all about. You know, just to go off track a little bit, the changing who presides over the airport. That's really, it's not rail run, it's not about, you know, problems. It's about who gets to divide up the money. They don't like who's dividing up the money at present. Well, that's how it is with this argument over the healthcare debate. There are some who believe that government should not be into what they call social programs and giving out the government's resources to those, the less than, the less fortunate. You somehow need to be able to pull up your own bootstraps. It's okay to give money and resources to big corporations. You know, they believe corporations are people too. But the reality is, I believe that it should be the other way around. We should take care of our communities. And it's much, you know, it's sad to say, but if a different political perspective had proposed something like the Affordable Health Care Act, it may be much more advanced right now, but it's just a matter of we don't want to give credence to an idea that will look like it's going to be an additional social program.
One of the frustrations is to hear an argument from anyone and there is no alternative answer when the argument's given. I can say, well, I don't like peas. Can I have beans? But to say I don't like peas and I have nothing else to eat is a problem. What's the alternative that's presented when we say don't get government involved in social programs? Then how do you solve the problem of underserved and low-income people who are hardworking, but they don't have the access because they don't have the high-paying jobs or the employment? What is the solution on the other side if government is not the solution?
Yeah. Pastor Harris, when we have this debate next, I'm going to use that example. Yeah, I'm going to give you credit for it the first time. As I go around, I'm going to say, as I always say.
It's all yours. It's all yours.
That is a brilliant question. It is just brilliant. And it's just part of the lexicon that we don't do this. This is something that we ought not do. It's just you're considered a conservative when you wish to conserve the state's money rather than spend it on what they consider to be social programs. Yeah.
Is the same thinking surrounding tax breaks and tax initiatives for the wealthy and for large corporations? Do we consider that government involvement, or is it just when it impacts low-income people?
Just when it impacts working class and low-income people. Being able to give tax breaks and incentives to corporations is the good conservative thing to do. And let me be fair, Pastor, I will tell you, I'm not anti-business for sure, and corporations have done some great things. We wouldn't have the kind of employment opportunities we would have in this state. Georgia being the #1 place to do businesses and attracting people to this state in numbers that you would not believe. Since 2010, 1 million new people have moved to Georgia. And it's primarily because of the economic opportunities that exist here. So certainly there are some great things that corporations are doing, but one of the things that we must do for those who aren't employed or unemployed, we have to find a solution, because you're going to pay one of the other ways. You pay me now, it's less expensive. You pay me later, it's going to be much more consequential, not only to the state's coffers, but to families and communities.
Last question on this: How can common everyday citizens of Georgia influence the policy that's happening at the State House?
Great way to end this conversation. Very often, and you probably hear it as a successful pastor that you are, various issues, I often hear, how come that community over there seems to get everything that they want, but this community over here seems to be underserved? And you know, I could give you all kinds of sociological and issues and reasons why that, but you know what the #1 reason is? The people who are well served are informed and engaged and involved, and those who are underserved are uninformed, unengaged, and uninvolved. If you could miraculously pick up all the well-served people and put them in the underserved area and put the underserved people in the well-served area, guess what would happen virtually overnight?
You would switch the situation.
That's exactly right. The services would
The lack of service follows the uninvolved.
Right. So if you get involved, get engaged, you let your policymakers know that this is an issue that is important to me, you'd be surprised at what you would be able to make happen.
I think it's a clarion call for people like me and pastors and other civic and social leaders that we keep policy issues, public issues, social issues at the forefront of our parishioners and congregants' thoughts. They need to be loud. They need to speak up. They need to show up at meetings. They need to be the squeaky wheel so that the oil can be given. I think that the issue of service is important, and we all have to engage in it at some level.
You know, let me add something to
Yes,
this,
sir.
because I think
Thank
it's instructive what Representative Mitchell said about engaging in the public sphere. Our community has a tendency to not want to be involved in public policy because we say politics is degrading, it's nasty, it's ugly. But it's reality. It's a part of our lives, and the decisions that are made impact us whether we're there or not. And if we're not there, we're not going to get the benefits like the well-served communities get. Same thing with healthcare. We don't access the healthcare system, even people who have insurance, right? There's some notion that the healthcare system is against us. And there are clearly examples where it's not worked in our favor. But ignoring it or avoiding it doesn't make our lives any better. It doesn't make us healthier by not going to the doctor because we are worried about what the outcome might be. By not going to the city council or school board or county commission meetings doesn't make our communities better because we're not there. Politics will still always be a part of our existence. Healthcare is a mandatory part of our existence and our ability to continue to breathe air and to live. So we have to take a more proactive approach to how we engage in these very, very critical aspects of our society.
What do you say to individuals who feel that their voice is never heard when they show up at the meetings and when they make the public statements and outcry that they still feel that their voice is not heard. How do you address that?
Well, it's sort of like when I play sports. We'd play 10 games a year. We wouldn't win all of them.
Yeah.
We kept playing. You can't give up because you lose once or twice or 3 times. It is a long game. We have to be persistent and willing to stay in the fight, even when there are sometimes losses.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add, you have to get like-minded advocates to join your cause. I tell new legislators all the time, they get upset when their legislation doesn't prevail and it's critiqued and it fails. And I said, look, if you can't get enough people to join your advocacy, maybe your advocacy isn't worth being successful in the first place. So you did have to make certain. I'll just tell you, there's a school not too far from here, as you know, in this county, how these schools are about their bands. They invited me to a PTA meeting, and they were upset about the fact that they could not get the kind of appropriation for uniforms that some schools in a different area of the county were getting. And I looked around, and they were all, high school students and 17, 18 years old. And I almost flippantly said, hey, you all can vote. I mean, you go to the Board of Education meeting and tell them that you're voters and you want this change. And I just said that as so next thing I know, maybe about 3 weeks later, hundreds of students from this school went to a Board of Education meeting showing them their voter registration card, said, I want this change. Do you know they changed that night?
Absolutely.
I mean, they didn't wait a week. They didn't say, we'll get back to you with study. There was a motion and a vote that night. And I'm just saying,
that's a game that was won.
There you go.
That's a game that was won.
Yes.
So it is with health care and then all our other issues. Yeah. We just have to get enough people engaged in our issues.
Yeah. Representative Mitchell, Virgil, Andre, thank you for being a part of the conversation. The reason why we're doing this is to not just give awareness about prostate cancer, but we're also doing this to fire people up to make the advocacy decisions and to make their voices heard so that policy can be changed. Anything can change if you fight hard enough for it. What would you say as your final thought, Representative Mitchell, to this issue?
I'm just always impressed that, for you, church is just not on Sunday morning. You are out in the community. You are making a difference in the community. And I think that is what being a good Christian and a good person in the community should be all about. And I applaud you. You're making our communities better, and I appreciate you. And I'm glad to be here to say that.
It's an honor to have you. Thank you, sir. Virgil, your final thoughts?
Well, thank you again for the invitation to be here. I applaud the efforts with this church and with the HEAL Collaborative. We can't do enough to inform our communities about opportunities to make our communities stronger, healthier, and more vibrant. And so thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Andre, jump in.
Yeah, the gentlemen have already said it all, but I would just say that if you do have access, utilize it. It is important, and it is a form of leadership that we as men need to operate in. And so, lead our families in that area as we do in other areas.
Absolutely. So I want to take this moment to thank all of our guests and our panelists for being involved and engaged in a crucial and important conversation. It's not just about prostate cancer, even though that's why we're here in the barbershop, but it's about leadership. It's about community. It's about what it means to be an African-American man and a citizen of this community and neighborhood. It's about what it means to be a father and a husband or a brother or a son. Taking responsibility for your health is probably the greatest leadership decision that you could make, because your health impacts everybody else who depends upon you. We've talked about research. We've talked about screening. We've talked about prevention. We've talked about diet and exercise. We've talked about surviving it, what it takes to get past a diagnosis. We've even talked about policy and what it takes to let our voices be heard so that greater access can be given to communities and families who don't have them. But there's something that we need to talk about beyond that, and that is, who you are to the people who love you. You can't be casual about something this serious. We need you to live. We need black men to live. Our wives and our children need us to be around, to be strong for our families. And so, for that reason, I'm encouraging you. Know your risk, know your background, know your family, know your history. Know where prostate cancer resides in your genetic background and be aware of the risk. Secondly, know your numbers. Get the exam. It's super uncomfortable, but get the exam. Draw the blood. Know your PSA numbers. Know those numbers because they're significant. And then, lastly, I want you to know that there is hope. The thing that we've heard over and over again is that it's beatable and it is treatable. And so don't let fear drive you away from your providers. Run to your providers. People like myself and others are going to continue the fight to make sure access is more unilateral. But you've got your own fight at home, and I'm praying that you fight it well. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I want to give my deep, sincere thanks to Heal Collaborative for their work in this area and being a pioneer in helping African Americans and other communities take more and give more attention to their health. It's an honor to have hosted this in the New Life Barbershop in a space that is dedicated and committed to serving the needs of those who are hurting and those who are the least, the last, and the left out. We love you very much. We're grateful to God that you've been a part of this experience. The Bible says that I wish above all things that you will prosper and be in good health. And God desires for you to be healthy. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you that you have brought us together for this conversation. I'm grateful for all the men who sat in these seats and encouraged us and informed us and educated us and helped us to see how critical this issue is. Now that we've done all that we can do, we turn the rest of this into your capable and strong hands. You are God. We are your servants. Show us the way. Give us strength as we continue the journey. And we'll give your name praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. Take care.